Learning is in our morals. Learning is essential. Learning is eternal. Welcome to the 7 Dimensions of Wellness, the podcast that helps you reassess your habits and helps you progress. The 7 dimensions are as follows: spiritual, physical, emotional, career, intellectual, environmental, and social. Reassess, progress. This is the 7 Dimensions of Wellness. Welcome back to the 7 Dimensions of Wellness. Tonight's dimension is spiritual. This is all about finding your value. Let me preface this episode by saying I will not focus on religion. I'll focus on the accumulated knowledge and wisdom that I've gained over the past few years. These are some of the lessons that I've learned as an employee, follower, teacher, and a big brother. Religion and spirituality are topics often considered to be sensitive. I encourage the listeners of this episode to be mindful and respectful for what I have to say. In the last episode, I talked about how I quit drinking. I mentioned that I had my relapses. Eliminating a bad habit is challenging. I talk about how reflecting, gaining perspective, and being accountable were the ingredients that helped me out. Now, I am going to speak in Filipino because I'm doing this in one take, but I'll do my best to try and translate it in English. Ngayon, bago magsimula ng episode, try muna natin mag-reflect. Okay, let's try and reflect before we start the episode. Ano ba yung why natin? Why are we doing something in the first place? Why do we want to have it? Friedrich Nietzsche's words echoed in my head. He who has a why can endure any how. I have to know my why. I have to dream big. Dude, I have to dream ridiculously big. Kung familiar kayo sa law of attraction, isa to sa mga aspeto. It's one of the many aspects of how the law of attraction works. Positive thoughts attract positive results. May pangarap ka. Ngayon, kung ano man yung paraan na gagawin mo para maabot yung pangarap na to, kayanin mo. You need to have faith. We have to go back to ancient philosophy. I'm going to heavily reference philosophy and philosophers because they have dedicated their life studying, advocating, and embodying what they teach. They practice what they preach. They walk the talk. So let's gain some perspective. Aristotle is a highly well-known Greek philosopher. His main teaching was the systematic concept of logic. In his time in Lyceum, I really cannot pronounce the Greek word, he then added that philosophy and logic play a key role in education. Seneca is a famous Roman philosopher. His name is synonymous with Stoicism. The point of the philosophy is to become a better person. This is done by actively practicing a lifelong education that they have read and learned, giving way to one of his famous quotations: men learn as they teach. So how does religion come into play? Yeah, how does religion come into play in all of this? Think of it this way. In Buddhism, Buddhist teaching contains 3 major points: discipline, meditation, and wisdom. Meditation helps us to develop concentration and calmness. In my religion, Christianity, Jesus' teaching contains loving our neighbor, respecting others, and reflecting. Reflection gives us insight into our own thoughts. Now, both meditation and reflection help us tap into our strengths and weaknesses. Okay, we already dive into philosophy. We already dive into religion. Now, how does science come into play into this? How does science come into play? I'm probably butchering this last person's name because I'm just like jumping it from memory. Jean Piaget? Am I right? I'm really sorry. He's a famous Swiss psychologist. He was curious about how adults acquire the ability to think logically, and his fundamental assumption that our environment has a primary influence, giving emphasis on the nature versus nurture argument. So, Paul, I get it. Okay, we got philosophy, religion, and then science. So how can we make something out of all of this? What's the meaning in all of these? Think of it this way. We want to learn something. We want to become a better person. Logic is important in education. Our environment can affect us. It's what we see. It's what we do. It's what we hear. It can possibly loosen our grip of our why. So we meditate and reflect to regain our purpose. All signs point to yes. Okay? All signs point to yes. Learning is in our morals. Learning is essential. Learning is eternal. Now, let's be accountable. Finally, jeez, where do I begin? Reflect. Here are some of the questions you can ponder on. Okay? What do I want to learn? What type of skill is it? Why do I want to learn it? Is it a hard skill or a soft skill? Is it for a specific task or social competency? That's why I highly suggest you start journaling. Some of these can be too much to remember. There's something about looking at what you wrote and being reminded of why you need to do it. It can also make room for objectifying the task and goals that you have in mind. It's a really good habit that I've been suggesting all throughout my episodes. After reflecting, gain perspective. What are the resources that I'll need? Is it accessible online or on site? How do I want to learn it? Is it lecture-based or activity-based? Is it by group or by myself? That's why I highly suggest you start reflecting. Identify what type of learner are you. Are you a visual learner, auditory learner, or a kinesthetic learner? Be aware of your strengths and weaknesses. What learning approach worked for you? Lastly, be accountable. When do I want to start learning? Is it on weekdays or weekends? Is it actionable within 5 minutes or is it going to take a while? Where do I want to do the learning? Is it in a private or public space? Is it in a quiet or noisy environment? That's why I highly suggest you start being honest with yourself. Write only what you can do. Eliminate any vague sentences as you journal. Quantify the time you'll be spending in learning and applying the knowledge you've gained. Reflect, gain perspective, be accountable. We practice independence for us to be stable. It's never too late to learn. It's never too late to learn. It's never too late to learn. Your life is about to turn. Thank you for listening to my weekly concern. I'll see you next week. And that's it for this episode. If you like to support the podcast, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok at Runaway Podcast. Subscribe to the podcast, share the podcast, run away with Runaway Podcast.